further expanding on historical records and memoirs of an actual exorcist to potentially creating a horror sequel like the amazing Conjuring series, here's how the sequel to The Pope's Exorcist is going to change everything. Get ready for some more of Father Gabriel Amorth, the sequel to the first part, which made a killing at the box office despite being up for less than 2 weeks, is in early development at Sony. And you can expect to see Russell Crowe return as a leading exorcist from the Vatican. So what's the new movie about? Well, it's going to pick up right where the first one left off, with the exorcist, Father Amorth, vanquishing the demon from the body of the possessed child. But as we know, evil never truly dies. And soon enough, a new demonic presence makes itself known. Chances are, that's what the new movie is going to be dealing with. Now, the cast and crew have been pretty quiet about the details of the upcoming movie. But what we do know is that we have another potential horror franchise to look forward to. The new movie is set to release on October 31st of this year, just in time for Halloween. And let me tell you, it's going to be a real treat. If you haven't seen the first movie yet, you are missing out on a real gem. Let me give you the gist of it real quick. The story from the first movie saw Crowe as a real-life exorcist named Father Amorth, and the audience followed him as he investigated the possession of a child. He attempted to free a young boy and his family from the grasp of a terrifying demonic possession. The demon was extra secretive about its name because that was his ultimate weakness. The story followed Amorth as he struggled to find the demon's name, which ultimately led him to a creepy well located under the building the possessed boy lived in. The place turned out to be linked to not just the Vatican, but the Spanish Inquisition as well. That's when Father Amorth discovered that the demon had been living under the building for centuries and had actually possessed several influential members of the church in the past, even some of the exorcists. The demon turned out to be one of the few that can possess multiple people at the same time, which is why it was able to infiltrate the church itself and push Christians to commit some pretty evil acts, all in the name of God. The rest of the movie followed how the Vatican covered up the whole story and Father Amorth's journey to trying to find the powerful demon's identity. But here's what has horror fans most excited: the teaser that we got at the end of the first movie. After Amorth and his father think they've successfully gotten rid of the demon, they return to the Vatican and are congratulated by the Pope himself. At this point, the viewer thinks that it's all over. But things are only just getting started. It was revealed that the Vatican had been going through the journals of a friar who had previously been possessed by the same demon, and in the process of doing so, they uncovered a couple of other burial sites where the people were at risk of being possessed. So now it's up to Amorth to make sure that doesn't happen. But don't worry, he won't be alone. Thomas is probably joining him on the adventure. At the end of the movie, the two priests are shown shaking hands, with Thomas saying, "Let's go to work," and Amorth responding with, "Let's go to hell." That particular scene got horror fans speculating whether a sequel was going to happen, and now the rumors have been confirmed. A sequel is coming. Now, the real question is whether the original demon will be returning for the sequel, or will we be dealing with a completely new demonic presence? Guess we'll have to wait and see. Until then, let's see what Crowe himself had to say about the sequel. You'll be surprised to learn that Crowe isn't the biggest fan of horror movies, but what drew him to this particular role in The Pope's Exorcist was the character himself. Father Amorth was a real person, and he documented his entire job. That's exactly what Crowe found so intriguing. He said that from an actor's point of view, that's just a treasure chest. When asked what it was like to work with Franco Nero, he said that he'd been watching his movies for a very long time, so it was really exciting to be a part of them for once. He was also asked whether he'd be down to play Father Amorth again in a sequel, to which he replied with, "I don't know, man. As soon as somebody actually says, 'We're thinking about a sequel,' I know there's never going to be a sequel." But au contraire, Mr. Crowe, it's happening. And guess what? Russell Crowe's on board, and I'm not really surprised, because he seemed to be super into the role in the first part, so it makes complete sense for him to be just as involved in the sequel. Probably because he knows there's a lot more of Father Amorth's story left to tell. considering the fact that he's based on an actual person. You heard me right, the events in the film may feel exaggerated and not real in any way, but the story is actually based on true events. Crow's Father Gabriel Amorth was a very real person, an Italian Catholic priest and exorcist who allegedly conducted over 50,000 exorcisms. Of course, not everything in the movie actually happened. It's a fun mix of events, partially real and fictional, all put together to come up with a modern horror movie that's historical as well. Like I mentioned before, it covers the Spanish Inquisition as well as the disappearance of Emanuela Orlandi. According to the film, the Inquisition was driven by a master exorcist while he was possessed by a demon, in the demon's attempts to give God and the church a bad name. Of course, this doesn't sit too well with historians or the church. It echoes the sentiments of the actual Father Amorth, who regularly claimed that the Vatican was infiltrated by the devil. As for Emanuela's disappearance, there are many theories out there about it, but according to Father Amorth, she was captured by the Vatican police, forced to perform at sex parties, and eventually murdered. There's no way to tell whether any of these claims are true, but that doesn't really matter for a movie like this. Any true horror fan knows that's exactly what makes a great horror film: a balance of truth and creativity. So who exactly was Father Amorth? He was ordained a Roman Catholic priest back in 1954. Around 2 decades later, he was appointed as an exorcist under the tutelage of a master exorcist, and eventually he went on to establish the International Association of Exorcists. For these reasons, Father Amorth is a familiar name to most, to the point that the director of The Exorcist, William Friedkin, even shot a documentary of him performing an exorcism. Throughout his long life, Amorth published several books, noting down all his adventures as he traveled the world to rid it of evil. That's where Crow found his inspiration. It's possible that the upcoming sequel will follow Father Amorth as he tries to defeat the same demon once and for all, given that he has a lot of burial ground to cover. 199 sites, to be precise. It could take a while, and a lot more movies. Like I said before, the actual Father Amorth claimed to have had thousands of cases. So there's potential for a whole franchise to be formed around those stories. If the creators of the first part want to stay true to the source material, they can always open up one of Amorth's books for reference. Considering that the first movie wasn't all that expensive to make, all the available source material, and the fact that Sony needs another horror franchise, I'd say The Pope's Exorcist is a pretty great choice. That's all I've got for you on how The Pope's Exorcist is going to change everything for the horror genre.